really be a cheerleader that tries to get more people running. What matters most to a runner is clean air. And when the air quality is not good, you realize it. So the more people that are running, the more environmental awareness I think we have, and the more people appreciate the environment.
This is Running for Real, the podcast for runners who know that for every runner's high, there are just as many lows. All those just missed PRs, easy runs that feel hard, injury blues, and more. Each week, we'll talk to running, health, and wellness experts about their highs, lows, and best advice to build our confidence. Running for Real is about being honest, being brave, and most of all, not feeling alone. And now here's our host, Tina Muir.
Hello, my friends. Welcome to episode 151 of the Running For Real podcast. Thank you so much for joining me today. I am really excited you are here. I know there are plenty of places you could be listening to, well, pretty much anything in this day and age, but I'm excited that you are here. And if this is your first time listening, welcome to the Running For Real podcast. I am excited that you are going to be joining us in the future, because hopefully you're going to be subscribing to this podcast in the future, especially after my guest today. If you are a fan of his and a new listener, I'm excited to meet you. Now, last week we had Nelly Acefida on the show, and she is a mother, an entrepreneur. She is a blogger, and she's just a wonderful person and gave lots of advice for those of you who are maybe thinking that you have or could have some kind of side passion, some side hustle. This could be something that you really enjoy, but you haven't quite taken that step. Maybe you feel like you don't deserve to do that. Maybe you have kids and you don't know when you're going to find the time. I hope after that episode you are thinking about it, because I think that is just something that more people need to jump on. And we had a wonderful conversation. If you missed that one, be sure to go back. Now, today I have my friend Dean Karnazes on the show. In case you missed it, we had him back on episode 81 of the Running For Real podcast. If you haven't already listened to that one, go listen to it. Dean was incredibly real. And I have told Dean this. I didn't expect him to be how he was when I first met him on that day. I thought he was going to be very kind of put together and give these kind of cookie cutter answers, but he didn't. He was really real with us. He was just completely open and shared things that I did not think he was going to share. It was a wonderful interview. It sparked this friendship between us, and you're going to hear that we got to meet recently, which was wonderful. Now, Dean has lots of exciting things coming as always. His schedule is full of lots of events and exciting things to do. But we're also talking about this book. I'm not sure how many of you have heard. I'm saying that. I would imagine most of you have heard of the Chicken Soup for the Soul books. I absolutely love them. Jack Canfield, who was the founder, I think, of the original one, he is one of my favorite people to look up to. I just adore that man and what he's been able to do. So I've always been a fan of Chicken Soup for the Soul, and Dean is excited to share with us this book that he has been working on with them called Chicken Soup for the Soul, Running for Good. You're going to hear more about that today. But we also kind of we started off with a very, very casual conversation, talking about some things that we did. Dean embarrassed me by talking about how bad I was at running downhills. And we talked about some other serious things that how we can make the world a better place, things like that. We talked about some of his favorite stories from this new book, because this book it only has one story from Dean himself. The rest of the stories are everyday people like you and me who are listening to this. They had people submit. There was 1,500 people submitting. And from there, they whittled it down to 101 stories. So I know this is the kind of book you guys will love. That's why I wanted to have Dean on to talk about this, because I think this is really what you guys are interested in. And we just had some real conversations about things. I asked Dean some very difficult questions. So I think you're going to enjoy that one a lot. So that is enough from me and my rambling. We are going to go meet and thank our sponsors, and we're right to the episode. Hi friends, quick heads up that my mental course goes on sale in a month's time. I will only open the doors for a limited window before they close up and will not open up again until May. If you put your name on the waitlist, I will guarantee you get a spot, guarantee you get it at the opening price, and I will let you know when it's out, because we all know those mental reminders we can leave ourselves or they leave our brain about 30 seconds after we say that we are going to remember them. So I can remind you to sign up, make sure you get a spot, make sure you get the introductory price. Otherwise you may miss out or end up having to pay quite a lot more. This is a 12-week course to prepare you for your next race. It has 16 videos, 23 action sheets to fill out to help you discover your greatest strengths, uncover those weaknesses, and give you ways to actually work on the negative voices in your head. So, you will know what to say back to them when they start screaming at you. You've been saying for years that you need to work on your mental toughness, and sure, you could go down a Google rabbit hole and spend hours figuring out how, but you could have done that years ago, so why didn't you? I'm saving you time and I'm giving you a step-by-step way to do this. And you will not only be accountable to me, but you also will have another class of runners who are going to help you go through it because they are going through it at the same time. I'm sharing everything I know about how to be mentally stronger so you can run to your potential. You can go get that dream that you have been thinking about for years. You can sign up at tinamuir.com/mental training to guarantee your spot. Just a quick moment. I just want to tell you about my friends over at Marathon Training Academy. Have you heard of Marathon Training Academy? Most likely because they have the top show on marathon training with over, listen to this, 8 million downloads. That leaves my 2 million in the dust. They've helped runners all over the world conquer the distance of the marathon. And Trevor and Angie are this husband and wife team that co-host this podcast, Marathon Training Academy. The Huffington Post said Angie Spencer is a registered nurse, certified running coach with serious marathon know-how. The hosts tackle all manners of listener questions from marathon fueling to injury prevention to compression clothing. But the best takeaway from this podcast is the Mondo dose of can-do attitude. I absolutely agree. If you love this podcast, if you love running for real, I want you to consider Marathon Training Academy because they're just wonderful people. They travel all over the US and they go abroad running races and sharing their journeys along the podcast. Angie is only 4 states away from completing her 50-state marathon quest, which is running a marathon in every state. You can find Marathon Training Academy wherever you get your podcasts, and you can find them online at marathontrainingacademy.com. If you, as a Running for Real fan, really enjoy the runner stories, Marathon Training Academy is definitely going to be one to add to your list if it's not already. Dean, my friend, welcome back to the Running for Real podcast. I am, as always, excited to talk to you and to have you here today. So thanks for giving us your time.
After that first interview, I'm very happy you're having me back. Something must have gone well.
I thought you were going to say the other way then. After that first interview, no. I didn't know if I'd ever...
I'm running away from Tina.
Ever do a podcast again.
I'm trying to escape her.
Yeah. Well, I'm afraid I have told a few people along the way when they're trying to give an example of how to be real. I use you as my example because you shared with us something that was quite personal. So you're my example to people. So hope you don't mind that.
Well, I don't mind one bit. And, since I was on that first time, I've realized what an incredible following you have. So many people said, wow, you're on Tina's show. You're so lucky. I'm like, oh, I know. I am. I'm privileged.
I was definitely the lucky one. For sure. Okay, so on that note, so not only have we had you on the show, this is your second time on the show, but we also got to meet in person recently. And I got to see your beautiful home. We got to go on a wonderful run together. So I would love for you to tell people, as I don't think this is something that most people would know, you don't actually, you yourself, have a car. People in your family do. But tell us about the decision not to have a car when you live in the middle of some hills that I can only describe as essentially a mountain themselves. So what was the thinking there?
I started training for these races called the 4 Deserts, which are self-supported races. In other words, you have to carry everything you need for 6 days of racing in some remote areas. So you end up running with a pack on that's heavy. It's got everything you need in there. So I thought, how can I train for this? So I got a pack and, I started putting some things in there. I said, well, let's make it a little more authentic. Why don't you try grocery shopping? Go to the store, do your shopping, and try to run home with everything. A gallon of milk in there, everything.
Well, you did not carry a gallon of milk.
One day the pack weighed 45 pounds. It was stuffed.
Wasn't the milk
and I thought,
like spoiled by the time it got home though with your like body temperature?
The milk did. I was spoiled. The milk survived. But yeah, no, it was I started training for this thing, and to your point, it was not easy, and things were going bad. Things were spoiling. So I thought, maybe I should just take the easy route. And I thought, if you didn't have a car, you would have no option but to run. So, this was over 10 years ago. I got rid of my car and decided I didn't need one, that I would just run everywhere. Mm-hmm. And I'd build my lifestyle around that. People say, well, that's impractical. I can't do that because of my job, this and that. I couldn't do it because of my job and this and that as well. But I said, you know what? You need to build your lifestyle around, your commitment not to drive a vehicle, to do what you can to help, largely to help preserve the environment and also set a good example. So, yeah, no car.
And do you still do your grocery shopping by running it back? Or do you have it delivered?
Well, I have to admit, with the advent of Uber and Lyft, it's gotten easier. Yeah, things have got. Yeah, they've changed everything. Because if you're fatiguing, you can just get a ride. Does that make
it tempting ever to call one of them?
It makes it beyond tempting. It makes it reality sometimes.
Oh, really?
I'm not going up this hill with a gallon of milk in my backpack.
Have you ever had anyone drive past you, like when they see you, like all exhausted and like disheveled, being like, I'm sorry, I changed my mind. Like, I'm not, like, because you're sweaty and stuff. I could see people who aren't runners being like, what is wrong with these people who run and like get themselves in these states? Have you had anyone drive off past you? Or have they all been nice enough to let you in their cars?
One day you'll have to shadow me and see what happens to me when I'm running and people drive by. I mean,
are they honking?
Some people honk at me like, get out of the way, you crazy runners. Other people like pull up next to me and want to take selfies. They're just like, oh my God, you're that runner guy. Like, you're crazy. You're amazing. Like, can I take a photo? I'm like, well, if you want, I'm out running. But yeah, no, I've had some funny experiences. And as well, because I've run in so many different regions of the world, like Texas, for instance, my in-laws live in Lubbock, Texas. And when I go running in Lubbock, if I go outside the loop, so the city's basically contained in this thing they call the loop. Mm-hmm. And if I go outside of that, it's kind of all ranch, it's ranch and farm area. I get asked constantly if I need a ride. People see me running like, oh, you need a ride somewhere.
Yeah. So I've had that happen in Michigan as well, being out in on the dirt roads. Yeah, that's funny. I actually, once my husband, Steve, who you know now as well, was following me in the car while I was doing a long run. And a car drove up to me and they were like, do you know that someone's following you in their car? And I was like, yeah. Because they were concerned that I had some weirdo following me along the road and was going to get me. But thankfully it was. You
should have said, he's a creep, call the cops and had him arrested.
Yeah, well, you told me that I'm supposed to be avoiding getting arrested on our last conversation, where I told you that I'd done something that wasn't exactly right by running up the on-ramp of the Golden Gate Bridge by accident. But so we're avoiding being arrested at this point. Now, when we did go for a run, you told me some news. And at the time you said it was not quite out yet. But I'm assuming by the time this comes out, as the audience doesn't know this, but we are recording about a month ahead of time. Are you able to share with us some exciting news that you have coming?
Yeah, I guess this is a good time to break the news because it hasn't really been public, but I was awarded the President's Council on Sports, Fitness, and Nutrition, the Lifetime Achievement Award. So awesome. I'm giving a keynote talk at the Marine Corps Marathon, which is at the last week of October. And at the end of the keynote address, I'm going to be given the award in front of the audience. So that to me, the award means a whole lot. It's kids nowadays, I don't think have to take the President's Council test. But when I was a kid growing up, we all had to take this test, and it was a big thing if you could do, the number of push-ups that you had to do within a minute, and if you can run a lap within 60 seconds. And I remember trying so hard to earn all my badges. And, at this day to be awarded that to me is really incredible. And another guy who was very much a mentor of mine, his name is Jack LaLanne. Mm-hmm. And anyone over 40 that's listening to this is like, oh my God, Jack LaLanne, amazing guy. Anyone under 40 is like, who's Jack LaLanne? But he was the original like fitness guru in the US. He had like this leotard, like this, this workout, kind of attire he'd wear, and he was on television, and he'd be doing like leg kicks and things like that. I remember my mom, in front of the television working out with Jack LaLanne. So he was the first recipient. And then,
who are some other people maybe that people might recognize?
A guy named Arnold Schwarzenegger.
Oh, I've never heard of that name before. You might have to
I don't know if he's a thing in Britain.
Yeah, I think he's a thing anywhere in the world.
Yeah, so he's also one of the winners. Okay. Yeah.
Well, that's pretty high bar to be standing alongside, and well done. That's really exciting, and I'm sure everyone listening is going to be really happy for you. And in addition to that, you also offered out your nannying duties. So that may be a future career for you to look after my child. So,
and you think I was kidding, but I love kids. I so adore kids, and your daughter is beautiful. So anytime.
Okay. Yeah. Well, as I said to you before, when you said you're traveling 20 out of 30 days a month, I'm not sure you want to be taking her with you 20 out of 30 days a month traveling. So you may regret that decision. But speaking of that, so traveling, let's just talk about that for a minute there. That lifestyle of being away, doing these keynote speeches, flying all over the world, that sounds really glamorous. It sounds so exciting. And I'm sure in many ways it is. But what are some of the things that people maybe don't think about when it comes to spending that much time away from home? Not just the, family. We can obviously all know that being away from family is hard. But what else are some of the things that people might not think about when they see people like you traveling all over the world, doing speeches and things like that?
For me, the biggest thing is that I remain energetic, and thankfully, I still have my health, because even though you've traveled, even though you've flown internationally, and you're getting up at the equivalent of 2 a.m. to give a talk to a group of runners, they don't care. Mm-hmm. This is Dean Karnazes coming to see them. They don't want to hear about me being fatigued and jet lagged and not feeling well. They want me to be on and be there for them. And I've traveled halfway around the world or completely around the world to be there for them. So I always rise to the occasion. I love meeting people. I love interacting with other runners. And it's not always easy. And the other thing that people, I think, don't realize is that, when you go on these big group runs with people all around the world, you're exposed to, runners. We hug each other. We do the farmer's blow, and then we're shaking hands, and you're just exposed to all kinds of, little viruses and bacteria and things like that. So you're constantly have the sniffles because you're basically just getting exposed to these different viruses across the globe.
Yeah, that would make sense.
Yeah, thankfully I have a strong immune system, but that's another factor that I think a lot of people don't realize. I mean, when I show up at a group run, they're going to look at me and they're going to say, how's this guy look? Is he strong? Is he healthy? And for me to make excuses like, well, I'm jet lagged and I'm sleep deprived, nobody wants to hear that. I don't even want to hear it. It's just an excuse.
Do you ever feel though that like there's a fine line between, you want to kind of show them the Dean that they want to see essentially, but at the same time, like, do you try to be real with people and say like, kind of, I'm like you, I get sick too, or I feel tired, and kind of show that vulnerability? Or is it kind of hard in your situation because people kind of expect you to be this kind of very almost impressive kind of godlike person? Do you find that people, you don't want to allow them to see that actually I'm just another human being? Like, where do you fall on that line?
It's a really weird dichotomy you just brought up. And it's, very few people can relate to this because, it's not everyone that, is running an ultramarathon and comes into an aid station and people just want to take selfies. I run an ultra and I might be 50 miles into a 100-mile race and just falling apart. And when I come into an aid station, no one wants to see Dean falling apart. They have this image that this guy can run forever and he never gets tired and he's never hurting and he's never sick. So when I come into an aid station, I just want to just get in my own head. I just know it's not going to happen, that when I'm going to have to rise to the occasion, and it's not really about me. It's more about giving back to people that get so excited to see me out there. I don't know. I think it'd be interesting maybe for you to interview someone that's seen me kind of, at my worst and see what their impression was. But most people always say to me afterward, my God, you were 75 miles into it and you were smiling and you were laughing and you were shaking hands and you were just so gracious with everyone. And I so appreciate that. So when someone says something like that to me, it gives me the energy to be like that time and time again, even though I don't always feel that way.
So it always does give you energy as opposed to kind of taking your energy and making you feel even more zapped because now you're kind of putting on a front. You find it always gives you energy.
You know what? If you could call it a front, but I mean, it is really genuine coming from me that I feel so fortunate, Tina. I mean, imagine running into an aid station anywhere and people being excited to see you. It's I don't know. I feel almost privileged in that regard that I really need to rise to the occasion. I feel like I owe it to them. And so, whether it's disingenuous or not, I don't really think so. I think that it's just, thankfully I've got the energy and I've got the resolve and I take care of myself and do everything I can so that when those moments arise, I can be at my best, or at least at my best, at my compromised best.
Yeah. Okay. That makes sense. And thank you for being honest with us there. All right. So just before we move on to this new book that I'm really excited to talk about, I want to go back to just what we were talking about earlier, where you said about not having a car partly for environmental reasons. Now, for you as someone who obviously is very passionate about looking after this world because you are out there appreciating it every day, what are some other things that you have thought about that runners can do themselves? Maybe even if it's not getting rid of your car, it's driving less, or what other than car stuff, or maybe including some car stuff, what else can people do to kind of do their part in cutting down on their own essentially damage to what we're doing to this earth?
What I really believe every runner can do is recruit more runners. Really be a strong advocate for your sport and really be a cheerleader that tries to get more people running. Because let's face it, when you're a runner, you are much more environmentally sensitive because you're breathing the air. I mean, what matters most to a runner is clean air. And when the air quality is not good, you realize it. So the more people that are running, the more environmental awareness I think we have, and the more people appreciate the environment.
Thank you to my longtime friends at Body Health for sponsoring this episode of the Running For Real podcast. You already know I love Perfect Amino. I talk about it every week and how it really makes a big difference with recovery, especially during times like this when you are training hard and racing hard. Taking 5 to 10 Perfect Amino tablets will help you to recover so much faster afterwards, get your body feeling back to normal. That soreness post-race is kind of fun for a day while you celebrate what you did, but then you just want to get back to feeling normal again, and Body Health Perfect Amino will do just that. But today I actually want to tell you about something else from the Body Health website. I'm really not a shake kind of person. I love to eat my food, so I haven't talked about this in the past, but many of you have asked me about Power Meal by Body Health, which is their recovery powder that you put in any drink. It is a powerful superfood blend which contains MCT oil, which I know many of you are very interested in, and it also contains Perfect Amino in it. You get the full hit of nutrition and you can recover much quicker post-run. And especially if you're more of a drinks person rather than a tablets person. As I said, I prefer to take 5 to 10 tablets of Perfect Amino. But if you like mixing things into your smoothie or some kind of like drink post-run, this Power Meal could be for you. You can get 10% off the entire Body Health website by visiting tinamuir.com/aminos. That's TINAMUIR.com/AMINOS. So many of you already love and use Body Health products, and they have a 100% money back guarantee. So what exactly are you waiting for?
What I really believe every runner can do is recruit more runners. Really be a strong advocate for your sport and really be a cheerleader that tries to get more people running. Because let's face it, when you're a runner, you are much more environmentally sensitive because you're breathing the air. I mean, what matters most to a runner is clean air. And when the air quality is not good, you realize it. So the more people that are running, the more environmental awareness I think we have, and the more people appreciate the environment. Mm-hmm. So to me, everyone listening to this, recruit your colleagues, get them out there with you running. That's one of my biggest charters. That's, one thing I try to do when I travel is coordinate these group runs and bring more new people into running. A lot of people think of me as, wow, this ultramarathon guy, this guy running crazy miles. But I also like running, just a fun run, a 5K fun run with people, even shorter. And one of the things I know we're going to talk about is the Chicken Soup for the Soul series. Why I love that book is because it's all about not elite athletes. It's about everyday athletes, runners and walkers that have started something that's changed their life. And they become better environmental stewards because of it. Yeah,
absolutely. So let's talk about that then. So you have been involved with the latest, or one of the latest, I'm sure they pump out a lot of books, one of the latest Chicken Soup for the Soul books, Running for Good. Now, firstly, just the series in general, how did you become involved in this, and were you a fan of it before you got involved, the Chicken Soup for the Soul books in general?
Yeah, I got involved with the series Chicken Soup for the Soul when I submitted a story, not about running. It was a motivational story. I happened to choose running as my story for one of their Chicken Soup for the Soul series. And digressing just a bit further, they've sold over 200 million books.
Amazing.
So you're right; it's a very, very popular title, and it reaches a lot of people globally. So when I submitted my story, a few months later, the publisher came to me and said, your story was so beautiful about running and about your daughter, because there was a story about running a 10K with my daughter on her 10th birthday.
Yeah, you talked about that last time, I think.
Yeah, I talked about it last time. They said, would you like to collaborate on an actual book about running, Chicken Soup for the Soul about running? And I said, of course I would. So this is the second book is called Running for Good. And the series it's a different format. People say, is it your book? Well, I wrote the introduction and I helped select the stories that are in the book, but it's 101 stories by 101 different contributors. So these are not my stories. These are short stories by runners and walkers from across the U.S. about something that they've done that has created good through running.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's so many amazing stories in there, just from all walks of life, all kind of levels of inspiration and just areas of the globe, areas of running. And maybe, Dean, if you could share, maybe we can do 2 or 3 maybe of your favorites that you would like to share with the group. And we can, if you let me jump in between each one so that I can, we can talk about it if need be.
Sure. I mean, one of my favorites is a friend of mine, actually. His name is Burr Purnell. Mm-hmm. And he's married to a Greek. I'm 100% Greek. So his wife is Greek. And they were going to travel to Greece just to explore the islands. And so they did that. They went with their family. They have 2 teenage girls. And they said the islands were beautiful. But they said, we want something deeper. We've heard there's some areas of the islands that are actually a bit more troubled, that they're refugee camps. So they said, we're going to go to the island of Lesbos, where there's these basically Syrian refugee camps from people that have left this war-torn country and are trying to get into Europe, and they're in these camps, and we're going to go and see what we can do to help. So they traveled there, and it's an unfortunate situation that's happening in Greece because, the Greek economy itself is not doing so well. And, they're doing their best to accommodate tens of thousands of immigrants trying to get out of Syria. So the morale was kind of low with especially with the younger kids. So Burr decided, why don't I'm a runner, I'm an ultramarathoner, why don't I take them running? And he started this running group. Mm-hmm. And it just brought life to these kids. It was something they looked forward to. They did their daily runs. It kind of gave them meaning, and they developed this program of running. And the story is just phenomenal. Yeah. How many lives he touched. And the Greeks started running as well, and the program is still ongoing. So I love it was a great story. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that was a really good one. Yeah, and I just want to say for the listeners, like each of these stories are maybe 2 to 4 pages, so they're really short. Like it's kind of, in my opinion, an ideal book to kind of read before bed, because you can read maybe 1 or 2 stories and then kind of, relax into your sleep, and it's not too, doesn't have much pressure to kind of get through it or finish it quickly, or in your bathroom, that's another good place to put it. Because then you can just read one at a time. But no, I absolutely love that one, and that was really special. And just in terms of that, like from what you have seen, people who are kind of in a very difficult situation, maybe someone listening has someone in mind who they know of who is going through a hard time, be it children, be it adults. What would be your advice for someone who kind of sees that person and thinks, you know what, like maybe I could get them a pair of running shoes and see if I could get them out there? What would be the best thing for them to say to that person to kind of maybe not patronize them, but to make sure that they feel like, hey, this could be something really good for them?
I think to show that you care. And I think you hit upon it in saying, maybe get them a pair of running shoes, or maybe get them a copy of Running for Good, the Chicken Soup book, mm-hmm. because there's something about reading stories about other people overcoming adversity and seeing how other people have had it hard as well, and they've somehow overcome, that gives you hope. I think a lot of people get in a position where they feel hopeless. Like, I can never do this. I can never lose all this weight. It's hard. Let's face it. It's really difficult. Mm-hmm. But, how do you break through that? I think one way is to read about others that have done that as well. And that's one of the reasons I'm so behind the Chicken Soup for the Soul series in general, is that it inspires and motivates people. Someone can tell you, okay, you need to exercise, you need to start running, you need to start walking. That's well and good. But unless you have that fire in your belly, unless you have that internal motivation, it doesn't do much. Yeah. But if you read a story, an inspirational story, that gives you the kind of the gusto just to get out there and do it.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of like, I don't know about, I guess it probably would be like that here in the US, but in England, after the London Marathon, that's when I will usually hear some amount of my friends or family at home decide that they want to run a marathon because they've seen it, they've kind of been inspired by it. And it's actually, like touched them on their heart and made them think, actually, this is what I want to do too. So I guess this is kind of like mini versions of that. And as Dean mentioned earlier, these are all quote unquote everyday people who, you may resonate with just in their day-to-day life. So really, really good there. And what about another one for us, Dean? What other one would you like to share?
Well, there's one about an Army veteran, actually a Marine veteran that had served in Afghanistan. And he had seen some pretty horrific things and was suffering from PTSD. And he was suicidal. He tried everything. He went through therapy. He was on drugs. And he said to his friend, like, none of this is working. I can't see life. I can't see my life continuing. And his friend was, search for things to try to help this guy. And he came across a story about running, helping with PTSD. Mm. So he shared that. He said, you know what, there's a story about running, how that can help. And he convinced his friend to start running. Well, his friend started running, and not just running. He started running big time, like marathons and ultra marathons. It saved his life. He stopped taking drugs. He stopped going to therapy. Running completely saved him. And to me, that was such a moving story because I have a lot of friends that have served, and I know what how tough it can be. I've seen it in their eyes, and running has really helped people overcome difficult situations like PTSD. So that was another favorite story of mine.
Yeah. And what number? Do you know what number that was? Just for people when they probably not chapter.
No, I you know what? There's 101 stories, so
why haven't you memorized them? Come on.
I know it was some. I think it was one of the title. It was there's a the chapters are titled. I think it was and it's Therapy and More. It was in the Therapy and More chapter.
Right. I'll let you off with that with the name. Okay, and then I just want to say to anyone listening, we do have that episode that is focused on suicide. We had that great conversation with Shelley Gordon. That was episode number 143. So if you or someone is kind of going through a hard time like that, I would maybe recommend going to listen to that one, because Shelley had a great story and really helpful advice in that one. So, all right, Dean.
Now I'm feeling very small, because how were you able to pull out of the hat? That was episode 143.
Because I have a calendar on my wall so I can see. Yeah, well, no, don't worry. I haven't memorized them all. I wish I had, but no, I have a calendar on my wall. I can only see back to episode 130. So anything before that, I have no idea. I want to say yours is like 82 or something. Yours is somewhere in the 80s. But that's as far as I can go.
Well, I think you should highlight mine if you're going to have me on.
That's true. I should have had that one memorized. All right. You are one. I owe you one. You owe me one, because we both didn't remember our numbers. All right. Would you like to share one more with us, and then we'll move on?
Well, there's one that is really well written, and it's by one of the co-founders of Another Mother Runner. Mm-hmm. I don't know if you know about Another Mother Runner, and if you've had that, you know all about them. Yep. And she wrote a story that was so well constructed about her relationship with running, and how it's a troubled relationship. It's a really quirky story that you just have to read. How some days things are good, they're in a torrid love affair, and other days they're going through divorce court. Yeah. So she draws some analogies and some similes that are really, really clever. Yeah. And that's one. Go ahead.
I was going to say, I know many people here are Dimity fans and Another Mother Runner fans, and you can hear her personality perfectly in this chapter in this book. So
she really comes through. Yeah. And, I actually I did a running retreat with them down in Mexico earlier this year, and really got to know them. And I'm such a strong proponent of that Another Mother Runner in the group and what they've created, because there's nothing like that, I think, for people in that kind of that stage of life. Yeah. And, these are all very highly accomplished females that, are looking for camaraderie and support. And, that's not an easy thing to find, right?
No.
But they've built it. Yeah.
If someone hasn't heard the Another Mother Runner podcast, definitely go listen to that. You talk about me having a tribe, Dean. Those two have a very, very impressive tribe. But
they're still fun though, right? They're like Absolutely. You. They're still upbeat, and they're fun to be around, and they make it enjoyable. Yeah. They are
wonderful, wonderful women, both of them. So just to wrap up with the book, Chicken Soup for the Soul, Running for Good. Just the stories in general, you said you had your part. Did you kind of just have some stories in mind from friends and people that you'd kind of met who you played a part in bringing in, or how did they find the other stories?
Yeah, I brought in probably a handful of stories from friends that I knew had good stories to share. But other than that, we basically just sent out like almost like a request for submission. It was a request for submission. So we had about 1,500 stories submitted for 101 that could be in the book. So it was really difficult going through trying to figure out, which ones we put in the book.
And did you do that as well? You were part of that process, like whittling it down?
Yep. We had a committee that we went through, and we read them all. And there was, like I said, there were some really, really great stories. So it was tough. It was tough getting it down to 101. But that's how we ended up with the stories that are in the book.
Yeah. And what did you learn during that process? Just hearing that quantity of stories from runners, was there anything you'd say that you learned during that kind of experience about runners in general?
Runners are universally optimistic people. They're can-do people. And I think a lot of it has come through overcoming obstacles and dealing with hardships. And I know, this is very fundamental to you and I, but running just teaches so many important lessons about perseverance and doggedness. And these lessons, people, they translate from the road to life, to business, to life, to everything. So when you start running, it holds a mirror up to you, right? You see exactly who you are. You see exactly what you're made of, how far you can go. And you see also how much better you are than you thought you were.
Yeah.
And I think that in all 1,200, 1,500 submissions, that resonated.
Yeah, I completely could see that being the case. And thank you for sharing that information with us about the book and just the process of doing it. Really, really interesting. And you mentioned about kind of learning yourself and kind of finding out what running brings you and how it changes you as a person. Now, I'm assuming over time you have kind of learned to trust in yourself a bit more and to kind of give yourself grace. I remember reading a while ago about you allowing yourself to sleep in rather than seeing yourself as this failure if you didn't get up early to run. So how has your kind of relationship with yourself been now compared to maybe when you first started running and kind of along the way?
It's funny. Now since I've made a career, believe it or not, out of running, now, to me, the challenge, I guess, is retaining the magic in running. And if you look at, how I've carved out a living, it's been very, very atypical.
Yeah.
But it's also a lot. It's also a lot of work. I mean, you're constantly hustling for your next book deal. You're hustling for your next sponsorship deal. You're constantly having to work at it, to pay the bills. And, that can be a grind, just like any job can be a grind. How do you keep it fresh? How do you retain, your love for the sport, even though it's your vocation? And so that's kind of a challenge of mine.
And what have you done to kind of do that? If you find yourself slinking into that thinking of this is a chore or I need to do this for the money, even if it maybe doesn't feel, or not even so much the money, but I need to do this kind of for my future, for my career, even though it maybe doesn't feel quite right. Have you had some experiences like that where you've had to kind of step back and say, I just don't think this is right for me?
Those are hard decisions, especially when there's a paycheck. Do you do something that kind of crosses the line or is close to crossing the line with your values, so that you can pay your bills? So those are, I often turn down sponsorship proposals because it's not a product I actually use. And it's not something I believe in. Mm-hmm. So I'm just not going to promote something that I don't personally use myself and I don't think has value for someone else.
Yep.
And that's just, those are hard decisions to make for anyone.
Absolutely.
But being someone that, is constantly, that's how you make your living, is through doing this sort of activity. Those sort of dilemmas are put in front of you much more frequently than I think someone who's just got a more stable career.
Yeah. Have you had any situations where you have maybe let it go near the line or cross the line? Like I can personally say that there's one thing in particular that I, said how much I loved it. And at the time I did. But then a few months later, I thought, oh, you know what? Like, I'm really not sure that was the right thing. And now people have purchased that. And I feel terrible because, they've spent their hard-earned money based on my recommendations. And I'm not sure it is the best or was the best thing for them. Have you had any situations like that? And how did you kind of let yourself move on from that, if you have? You don't have to mention, obviously, any brand.
Well, I mean, let's go back to the car scenario.
Yeah.
And at the time when I decided I wasn't going to drive, I had a sponsorship deal with Volkswagen.
Oh, wow.
And they had just given me a brand new car, a really nice car. And it sat idle. It sat for 1 year. It had 3,000 miles on it.
Wow.
And, a typical Californian drives about 20 to 25,000 miles. So it was pretty obvious I wasn't using this vehicle often. It was a 3-year contract, and I just felt so horrible at the end of the first year that I actually wasn't driving this thing, that I ended the contract. And that was really tough.
Thank you to John G for sponsoring this episode of the Running for Real podcast. Friends, can I just tell you how proud I feel to be wearing their clothes when I'm out running? Knowing I'm wearing a brand that genuinely care about this world, that was the reason why they started this company, because they wanted to give back to this community, you guys right here, while they're also giving our community comfortable, unique clothes to wear. As I've made pretty clear by now, I adore the patterns, the design, and I love that they changed up the patterns to represent the country they are supporting through a local designer in that country who comes up with the patterns. That's just so cool. And I feel like the roses on black for the current season does really remind me of Mexico, and I just love it. And they also give 5% of sales back to clean water initiatives in the country that inspired that season. That's just wonderful. And also the fact they use recycled materials for many of their items and unique materials like alpaca wool. It's just creative. You know, I take a lot of pride in the companies I work with, and this one I feel super proud to be working with. I have a list of my favorite items on my website at tinamuir.com/Janji. And you can get 10% off the entire Janji website by visiting runjanji.com and using code TinaMuir. That's runjanji.com and use code TinaMuir for 10% off your order.
Typical Californian drives about 20 to 25,000 miles. So it was pretty obvious I wasn't using this vehicle often. It was a 3-year contract, and I just felt so horrible at the end of the first year that I actually wasn't driving this thing, that I ended the contract. And that was really tough. Mm-hmm. That was really tough. But I just felt like I was publicly giving this message like, hey, I'm not driving, but I was sponsored by a car company.
Yeah.
And it didn't resonate.
And how did you give yourself the grace to move on and say, it's okay, maybe that wasn't the best decision, but I have done the right thing now. I can let it go. Was it just the giving it back, or kind of the ending the contract was the enough to get you to that point?
Well, this is an interesting conversation because
I didn't know we were going to go down this road.
Yeah, no, but the saving grace I thought is, well, you promoted this vehicle, but it was the reason they sponsored me is it was the introduction of their ultra clean diesel vehicle. So this was a vehicle that was supposedly environmentally much better, healthier for the environment than typical diesel or a typical gasoline car. So I thought, well, at least you promoted a vehicle, but at least it's one of the better vehicles.
Yeah.
Well, what happened? 8 years later. I mean, I don't know if you followed the whole the whole scandal with Volkswagen, but they had basically lied about how clean this vehicle was. It wasn't that clean after all.
No, I didn't know that.
And and so they paid millions, if not maybe $1 billion in fines globally with this emissions scandal that they had perpetuated, where they basically did something with the way the engine was wired that fooled these machines that were testing for how bad the vehicle was as far as its output. Huh. So it didn't end up being that clean a vehicle after all, is the net of it.
Yeah.
But that was like I said, that was about eight years later after I had severed relationships.
Do you think any part of you kind of knew that maybe it was too good to be true, or it seemed a little off, or was that just a gut feeling?
No, to me, it seemed wonderful. I mean, the first introduction we did was brilliant. I thought it was, I did the Chicago Marathon twice. Mm-hmm. So it was the introduction of this ultra vehicle, and the ultramarathoner goes twice as far because the Volkswagen, the TDI was supposed to get twice as many miles on a tank of gas. So it's supposed to be highly efficient. And the ultramarathon man runs twice as far. So I basically ran the Chicago Marathon with, 35,000, 40,000 other runners. And when I got to the finish line, I just kept going for a second loop. And it was supported by this fleet of Volkswagen clean diesel vehicles.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Huh. And I thought it was brilliant. It got really great uptake. Other runners came out and ran with me along the way. No one else ran the full marathon, but a couple other people ran, 3 or 4 miles along my side. So we had other people, and we finished, the sun was setting. It was the second loop, and it was a really great promotion.
Oh, that is cool. Oh, that is interesting. Yeah. And I did not know anything about that, any part of that, about them or about the race you just mentioned there at Chicago, doing that twice. That's great. And so cool that you could do it in a place like Chicago where there could be a lot of people who maybe even aren't out to support you, but just happen to be around. So I'm sure that helped you with kind of finishing it and getting through it. So that's awesome. All right. So let's talk about future. You mentioned to me before we started recording that you have an exciting trip coming up. So maybe tell us a bit about that.
Well, I'm getting ready to fly to Europe, specifically to Greece, to do a couple races. The first one I'm going to do is a race called the Spartathlon, which is a 153-mile foot race from Athens to Sparta. And I'm scared. I don't want to say the next word, but something less, because it is because the last time I got struck by a car, and I'm in the midst right now of a 120-mile week. And Tina, I'm feeling it. After this call, I got to go run 25 miles, and I'm kind of beat up. And this is day 5 of this big load of a week, the last kind of long week of running. And so, probably it's good, but I'm really concerned about the race coming up. So we'll see how it goes.
Like more than you have been when you've done that race before?
I think so, because now I have a full understanding of just how difficult the race is. I think I'm going into it with clearer eyes. Before, it was always kind of this romantic notion of, running from the base of the Acropolis across ancient Greece, to Sparta. And now I know how difficult it is to do.
But you also know that you're going to eat this time, not try and run 75 miles on nothing but fix. So that might help too.
Yeah. I mean, we'll see how it goes. I know what I'm up against, and I guess that's what scares me.
Yeah.
But I guess,
normal.
I think, maybe people are like hearing that I get scared before these big races. I mean, it's standing at the start of a 153-mile foot race is terrifying. I have to be honest. It's a really, really difficult challenge, and you know what you're going to put your body through. And you know what it takes to get to the finish line. And it's to me, it's terrifying.
And what are some of the things going through your head? Maybe on the start line, maybe during this week, let people in a bit and let them hear what are some of the things that your self-doubt will say to yourself that you then have to pull yourself out of? The commitments I have leading up to the race, is, there are a lot of things I'm doing beforehand. And I just got a couple of days ago contacted by a company in Greece, like the equivalent of the ESPN of Greece, saying that I won this award, the Sportsman of the Year award. And it's such a great honor. And they want to bring me over so that I can attend the award ceremony that's televised live. Wow. And
it just so happens that award ceremony is the night before the Spartathlon. Oh. And so, I mean, I've got to get this award. It's great, but I know how the Greeks are. I mean, typically these things start at 9 at night, and it really gets going around midnight, and it kind of peaks at 2 a.m. And then, if it's an early night, you're home by 4 a.m. and the race starts at 7 a.m. So
what are you going to do?
I'm going to do exactly what I just outlined. I'm going to receive the award and try to be as gracious as I can, try to get a couple hours of sleep. And
So you don't think you could, would that be insulting to kind of accept the award and then say, I'm sorry, I have to get to bed? Or you're saying the award will be given out till 12 or 1 or 2?
I imagine it'll be given out probably around 10, maybe 10:30. But, the cameras are rolling. So, I'm going to try to duck out by midnight. That's kind of, I think I can graciously say at midnight, I got a big race tomorrow. Mm-hmm. But, that just happened literally a few days ago. I was just notified. So, what's the saying? Shit happens.
That's true. That's true. Although a pretty cool thing to happen, but maybe just not ideal timing.
Yeah, let's be honest. What would you do? It's a great honor. You would probably do the exact same thing I'm doing.
I don't know. I feel like I would be a little more like, I can get what my listeners know. I have a side of me I call Airport Tina, and I think she would come out and make me leave at 10:30. Like, I think I would be stubborn and like, nope, I need to get my sleep. Like, this is really important to me. But you obviously understand the culture a bit more than I do. So maybe, I wouldn't be able to do that once I was in that situation. But I feel like right now I do not mind kind of saying, even if I'm out with my friends when I'm home in England and they're like, oh, come, you're not here very much. Stay with us. I'm like, no, I'm sorry, I'm going. So I'm quite like abrupt.
You've got that stern upper lip of a Brit. Yeah.
I don't know if it's the Brit. My grandma was German, born in Germany, so I think it probably comes from her being that
kind of toughness.
Yeah. So do what I have to do. But yeah, no, that's interesting, and I'd love to hear what anyone listening thinks. I'd like to hear your thoughts on what should we do on Dean's dilemma. Although your mind sounds like it's kind of already made up. So I
think anyone listening to this is going, you privileged jerk.
Yeah.
This is a problem, Dean. You're getting a Sportsman of the Year award, and you're telling us this is a problem and a dilemma. What are you talking about?
I'm the one that turned it into a dilemma. To be fair, you were just saying your information, and so I definitely took it on. So no one listening blame Dean. This is my fault. Okay, so you have that coming up. Anything else on the agenda after the Spartathlon?
Yeah, so I'm doing a couple of the races in Greece. The one is called the Santorini Experience. So it's a race in Santorini. Poor me, right?
Yeah,
and then the week after that, I'm doing a race called the Navarino Challenge, and this is this is undoubtedly the most scenic half marathon in the world. It's in a place called Messenia, Greece. Mm-hmm. And it's just a phenomenal course that no one knows about. The Greeks come out and support it.
You've done a lot of Greek runners, haven't you?
This is our 7th annual year. So This is an annual event, and it brings out tons of kids. It brings out a lot of really great camaraderie, and I'm kind of like the center of it all. But I'd love for more people to start coming from overseas to run this race, because it's a world-class setting, and you'd just be so amazed that this race takes place and it's not really that well known. I mean, everyone knows about the Big Sur Marathon, right? It's the most beautiful race in the world. The Navarino Challenge is every bit as beautiful, and it's warmer, and it's only a half marathon, but not many people know about it. Not many people show up from overseas.
Well, if you want to bring someone to hold your shoes and hold your water, then I'll volunteer. So I'm sure everyone listening would too, but I'm putting my name out there first. If you need a volunteer to help, you can swing by and pick me up on your way over there.
I'd love to see you there.
Yeah. I would love to. I really want to travel and explore as much as I can. That is something I'm really passionate about. So I'm sure I will get out there at some point. It's just a case of when.
So that and then after that's done, I'm flying to Australia.
You said that even in the right way. Did you do that on
Australia?
Purpose? Yeah.
Australia, mate. I actually used to live in Australia, so I've got my Aussie accent.
Okay.
So I'm running the Blackall 100K, which is in Queensland on the Sunshine Coast. So if you've ever been to Australia, the Sunshine Coast is one of the most beautiful coastlines. So there's a 100K race there called the Blackall. And I met the race director at the Western States 100 a couple years ago, and he invited me to come over.
That's great.
So,
lots
I'm flying
of exciting stuff.
From Athens to Sydney, which is is halfway around the world.
Yeah. Are you getting on one of the 17-hour planes?
I'm getting on one of the 17-hour planes, 17 and a half hours.
Is it?
Yeah.
Yeah. We did that from LA. I think it was LA. Oh, no, it was Texas to Sydney as well. And it actually isn't as bad as people might think it is for that long of a flight. I feel like after 11 hours, everything kind of feels the same.
Well, the problem is when I fly home from Australia, I'm flying directly to the Marine Corps Marathon. So I'm flying that 17-hour flight, and then I'm getting on a 5-hour flight right on top of that.
That will
so
be
it's going
some legs will need shaking out that day. Definitely.
Well, I'm the ULTRAmarathon Man, so I can do it.
Yes, although you exposed today, you are not a superhero, even though you are impressive and amazing with what you are able to do. You are just a regular person, and we love that about you, that you do also get scared on the start line of a race. And Dean, I have once again loved our conversation, and I hope everyone listening has enjoyed getting to know you more, hearing about the Chicken Soup for the Soul, Running for Good. Is there anything else you would like to tell the listeners, or I guess you can tell them afterwards where to find you and follow you? And I will have a link to the book in the show notes. So what else can they learn right now?
I mean, if you want to follow me, just Google my name, and I'm very followable. I'm on social media. I've got a website. But I'd like to conclude this interview with talking about you.
Oh, no.
And something that really, really surprised me, and I'm going to rib you a little bit.
Uh-oh.
So we went running together, right, here in Marin. And what did we do? Of course, we ran up a hill. And what did you do? Of course, you kicked my butt running up the hill.
Well, I think the funny thing was when we started the run, I took off. And I wouldn't even say I took off. I went at a normal speed. But then I had to say to myself, no, you're running with an ultramarathoner. You're running up like a very steep hill. You do not start at like 7:30 per mile pace. So that was the first part. Okay, carry on with what you were going to say.
Well, you still had a lot of gas in the tank on the way up the hills. Like, I was amazed how well you climbed those hills.
But you also had run 35 miles the day before and strength trained.
But I do run with a lot of people, and you impressed me. I have to be honest.
Wow.
For not being an ultramarathoner or a trail runner. But what really surprised me is when we turned around and started coming down. You were so pensive. You're saying, "Oh my God, there's rocks, there's roots, there's this and that." I'm like, are you serious, Tina? You said, "Oh, my footing's unstable. I might slip." I thought, okay,
you were just leaving
She's
me in the dust.
She's not an ultramarathoner.
So, yeah, any kudos you'd given me on the way up, I completely lost on the way down. And I will tell you, Dean, since then, as my audience knows I am sponsored by Ultra, I did ask Ultra for some trail running shoes, and I do have some trail running shoes now. So I won't have to run in you were kind of laughing at my shoe choice as well. So next time you won't be laughing at me because I'll have some proper trail shoes to look impressive with.
Well, I look forward to that next time. So bring those shoes, Tina. Yeah.
I will be. Thank you so much, Dean. And we look forward to hearing you the next time around.
Thanks for having me on.
My friends, if you have a minute and you could leave a review on your favorite podcast player, Apple Podcasts, aka iTunes, Stitcher, Overcast, Pocket Cast, Spotify, or whatever else podcast player you use to listen to this podcast, or if you would subscribe to this podcast, you will help me get out in front of new runners to make our tribe even bigger and even better. It might not seem like you as one person can make a difference, but really it helps a lot. And it shows me you appreciate the hard work I put in for those. Thank you so much. Okay, so other than us trying to one-up and embarrass each other on that show, I hope you enjoyed that episode with Dean. He's just a wonderful person, and I really enjoyed talking to him, and I hope you enjoyed listening to that episode, especially as it was a bit more of a kind of casual and relaxed episode. I definitely recommend that book, Running for Good, Chicken Soup from the Soul. It is just wonderful. The stories are such feel-good stories. I know you guys, and I know you're going to love these stories because they're exactly the kind of stories that you would write, and maybe they will inspire you to do something special. But if not, they'll inspire you to see that you too are special, even if you don't think you are, because a lot of these stories may resonate with you without you even realizing it. Now, as I am currently in the middle of my vacation in England, one of my best friends is getting married and Bailey and I are in the wedding. We are in England right now, and as of this recording, I actually have no idea who is coming next week, so it is a mystery to you. I do know who it is by the time you're listening to this, or I would at least hope so. But I want to remind you to go subscribe if you have not already, so you can automatically get that episode to your favorite podcast player. You do not just have to use Apple Podcasts or iTunes. You can use any of your favorite podcast players to subscribe and make sure you get these episodes straight to you. But until then, I hope you have a wonderful week, my friends, and I will see you for our final Beyond Running episode on Monday.
Thanks for listening to the Running for Real podcast. Be sure to check out tinamuir.com for show notes and even more helpful running information.